Maggie's life is turned upside down when her upstairs neighbor, Jack, wakes her up every morning with his loud workouts. After months of frustration, they meet online under fake identities, only to discover they've been bickering with each other all along. What starts as a clash of personalities turns into something unexpected as they face the reality of who they are to each other. Can two strangers turned rivals find a way to make it work, or will their past keep them apart? Stay tuned to find out how it all ends, and don't forget to subscribe. At precisely 6:04 a.m., the ceiling in Maggie Brooks' bedroom thundered like a freight train passing through a war zone. She shot up in bed, heart pounding, fists clenched around her comforter. There it was again, thud, thud, thud. The unmistakable rhythm of a treadmill pounding above her head like some kind of cruel military march. For the third time that week, the peaceful lull of dawn had been obliterated by her upstairs neighbor's relentless cardio obsession. Maggie threw off the covers and stormed toward her closet, muttering under her breath, "That man is a one-man demolition crew." She yanked on a robe, cinched it tight with trembling hands, and marched barefoot toward her front door. A hot spike of fury ran down her spine with every stomp. She didn't care what he looked like, what excuse he'd cook up this time, or if he was training for the Dan Olympics. She was going to end it. The hallway outside was silent, as if the rest of the apartment complex still floated in dreams Maggie had been rudely ejected from. Her knock wasn't really a knock. It was a declaration of war. She banged her fist against his door like she meant to punch through it. "Open up, Jack," she shouted. "This is insane. I swear to God, if you don't shut that thing off, I'm calling the police." It took a few seconds, maybe 10. Enough time for her to wonder what her hair looked like, or whether her robe covered enough to avoid a public indecency charge. The door creaked open. There he was, Jack Donovan, shirtless and smug, with a towel slung over his tan shoulder and sweat glistening across his chest like it had been painted on by the devil himself. His breath was steady, chest rising and falling like he hadn't just ruined someone's morning for the 100th time. His eyes scanned her slowly, a flicker of amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. "Well, good morning to you too, Maggie," he said with infuriating calm. "What's the emergency? Miss your alarm?" "You are my alarm," she hissed. "Every morning, like clockwork, bam, 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 right above my damn bed. I haven't slept past sunrise in a month. Do you seriously think it's okay to train for a marathon in a second-floor apartment?" He rubbed the back of his neck, towel shifting as he leaned against the doorframe. "It's not a marathon. Just trying to stay in shape. Sorry if it's loud, but maybe, just maybe, you'd sleep better if your TV wasn't blasting the History Channel until 2 a.m. every night." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. He had the nerve to deflect. "My TV is not." She stopped herself, narrowing her eyes. "You've got a lot of nerve. I'm trying to wind down at night. That's relaxing. You're out here doing jumping jacks above my head like you're in basic training." "Funny," he said, a trace of a smile now fully formed. "That's what your movie marathons sound like to me. Explosions, yelling, dramatic music. Every night. I figured you had surround sound installed." She scoffed and threw her hands in the air. "You know what? Fine. Keep stomping around. Just don't be surprised when I blast Die Hard at full volume tonight. Hope you like Bruce Willis." "Actually," he said, tilting his head, "I'm more of a Stallone guy." That did it. She turned on her heel and stomped back toward her apartment, cheeks burning with rage, and something else she refused to name. not attraction. Nope. Just adrenaline. Just fury. She slammed her door behind her, leaned against it, and groaned. This was not sustainable. Not his workouts. Not her late-night binge sessions. Not this cold war of noise and sarcasm. Something had to give. As she stood there, staring at the ceiling, she wondered, how can someone be that aggravating and that good-looking at the same time? And why did his smirk still echo louder than the treadmill? That evening, Maggie poured herself a generous glass of Cabernet and sank into the familiar indentation of her couch, her robe swapped for a faded Georgia Bulldog sweatshirt and leggings that had seen better days. The TV remote lay untouched beside her. For once, she didn't want the usual noise. Not the safe buzz of a late-night crime drama, not the white noise of evening reruns. Just silence, the kind she hadn't truly experienced in weeks. She pulled her laptop onto her lap, tapping at the keys with that twitchy post-argument energy that never quite left her alone. Her inbox was empty. Her calendar was even emptier. A tab was still open from earlier, some neighborhood forum she'd stumbled onto while searching how to file a noise complaint in Savannah. Out of spite, or maybe catharsis, she clicked into a thread titled, "When Your Neighbor Makes You Crazy." The comments were a mess of petty gripes and serious rants. One woman claimed her downstairs neighbor ran an illegal dog grooming business out of his bathroom. Another was convinced the guy across the hall had built a meth lab inside his coat closet. Maggie rolled her eyes, but she kept scrolling. It was ridiculous. It was addictive. Then she saw it. A simple post, short and sharp. Some people should live in the woods. Alone. Grey Wolf 76. She snorted into her wine. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Against her better judgment, she clicked reply. Preach. My upstairs neighbor uses a treadmill at 6 a.m. every day. It sounds like an elephant learning ballet. I've asked him to stop. He says I watch TV too loud. It's a war zone. She hit send. Seconds passed. A minute. She took another sip, half expecting silence. But then, that's almost funny. Almost. My downstairs neighbor practices karaoke at midnight. Celine Dion. Every night. I didn't know it was possible to butcher my heart will go on that many times. She laughed, out loud this time. It felt foreign, like something that belonged to someone else. She typed back. Okay, that might be worse. I'm not a fan of Celine, but at least I can understand her lyrics. My neighbor grunts like a Viking doing CrossFit. Grey Wolf 76 responded almost instantly. Maybe you and I are the only sane ones in this entire building. Tell me this, when did being a decent neighbor become optional? That was it. The hook. The rhythm of something unexpected, someone who understood. Maggie's shoulders relaxed a little. The sting of the morning's fight faded just enough for her to settle in. The conversation didn't stop. They messaged for hours that night, each reply fast, clever, uncannily aligned. They discovered a mutual love for old Hitchcock films, red wine, and cooking shows they never tried to imitate. Maggie told him about the time she accidentally set fire to her Thanksgiving turkey and ended up eating cranberry sauce out of the can while watching planes, trains, and automobiles. He told her about an ex-girlfriend who claimed she was allergic to sunlight and insisted they only go on dates in candlelit basements. By midnight, Maggie had forgotten all about Jack and his God-forsaken treadmill. They never exchanged names. They didn't send photos. They didn't even ask. It wasn't about that. It was the freedom to be heard without being seen. The thrill of anonymity, The kind that made you say things you'd never admit out loud, like how she sometimes faked phone calls in the grocery store to avoid small talk, or how he couldn't stand the sound of people chewing, even in movies. Maggie couldn't remember the last time someone made her laugh like that. Not a polite chuckle, but the deep belly kind that left her breathless and a little lighter than she'd felt in years. The next night, she logged in before dinner, fingers tapping nervously as she waited for a new message. It came. Thought of you today. Someone at work brought a treadmill desk. I nearly threw my coffee at it. Felt like solidarity. Her smile bloomed slowly, almost involuntarily. That night, she slept with her laptop still open, her glass half full, and for the first time in a long time, Jack's footsteps above didn't seem quite as loud. 2 weeks had passed. 2 weeks of strange, electrifying conversations with someone she'd never met, yet somehow felt closer to than anyone in years. Maggie had forgotten how easy it was to talk to someone without the weight of history of expectations. She had her work, her friends, and the occasional date, but this was something entirely new. No games, no forced small talk, just a simple, growing connection over late-night messages and shared frustrations. By now, their conversations had covered everything. From favorite childhood cartoons to the best pizza toppings, he swore by pineapple. She was still unconvinced. They even discussed politics, respectfully, agreeing to disagree about a few things, but still managing to find humor in the absurdity of it all. They had moved from casual chat to discussions that felt oddly intimate. There was no hurry to meet face to face. The distance felt comfortable, almost necessary. But tonight was different. Tonight, he'd suggested something Maggie hadn't expected. Let's meet. No photos, no pressure, just trust. His message was brief, simple, almost disarming in its openness. Maggie stared at the screen, her heart skipping a beat. This wasn't some casual text exchange. This was real life. No more hiding behind usernames. No more sending witty replies into the void. This was a commitment to face-to-face reality. It wasn't exactly the safest move, but it wasn't like she was dating anyone else, and for some reason, her gut told her she could trust him. Still, doubts gnawed at her. What if he was a creep? What if he wasn't who he said he was? Or worse, what if it was Jack, her infuriating upstairs neighbor, the very man she'd been bickering with for months, pretending to be someone else? No, don't overthink it. She shook her head, forcing herself to breathe deeply. Okay, she typed back. Let's meet. They agreed on a local restaurant in the historic district of Savannah. Pekin and Palmetto, a cozy spot with flickering candlelight and low jazz that could make anyone feel like they were in a movie. She couldn't remember the last time she'd gone out for dinner by herself, not since her divorce, certainly, and the idea of meeting someone new made her heart race in an almost thrilling way. As the day wore on, Maggie found herself growing increasingly restless. She tried to distract herself with work, then a half-hearted attempt at cleaning, but the thought of the evening kept creeping back in. She dressed casually, but still put on her favorite red dress, the one she reserved for special occasions, or, in this case, a chance to meet an anonymous stranger. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and she applied just enough makeup to make herself feel like she'd made an effort. By the time she stood in front of the mirror, taking one last look at herself, Maggie felt a strange combination of excitement and dread. She grabbed her purse, took a deep breath, and stepped out the door. The restaurant was bustling when Maggie arrived. She checked her phone, confirming that they were still on for 7. When the hostess led her to the table, her stomach twisted. She could barely swallow. What if he wasn't there? What if it was all a cruel joke? And then she saw him. There, sitting by the window in a crisp red polo, a dark-haired man with a confident but unfamiliar smile. Her pulse hitched in her throat. He was exactly as described, yet somehow not. He was leaner than she'd imagined, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that sparkled with humor. A sense of recognition hit her like a freight train. Her stomach dropped. It was Jack. Jack Donovan, the infuriating, rude neighbor who'd made her life hell for weeks. She had walked into a restaurant expecting to meet a stranger, and instead, she found herself staring at the man who had kept her awake at all hours, making snide remarks about her TV habits. She froze in place, her brain scrambling for a way out. She couldn't. This couldn't be happening. This was absurd. She took a step back, her mind racing. How could this be? Before she could turn to leave, Jack noticed her. Their eyes locked for a heartbeat. Two people who shared a moment of shared disbelief. His smile faltered, and for the first time, she saw something beyond annoyance in his eyes. Something vulnerable. He stood up quickly, his chair scraping against the floor. Maggie? Wait, don't go, he said, his voice low and sincere. Her heart slammed in her chest. No, this can't be happening. She felt her cheeks burn, but she wasn't sure if it was from anger or something else, something much deeper. You're Grey Wolf 76, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, barely able to hide the shock and confusion. Jack swallowed hard, his hand instinctively running through his hair. Yeah, he said, his voice thick with tension. I didn't plan for this either. I didn't think you'd be you. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, but then, almost as if a dam had broken, they both started laughing. It was awkward at first, then louder, realer. The absurdity of it all, the shared confusion, the strange twist of fate. They were both in the same boat, staring at each other with wide eyes and that shared, inexplicable connection. Maggie felt the anger she had been carrying for so long, anger about the treadmill, the noise, the endless misunderstandings, start to melt away. It wasn't all Jack's fault, she realized. It wasn't all her fault either. Maybe they were both just two people who had built up walls without even realizing it. Jack, now clearly flustered but still smiling, gestured to the seat across from him. Sit down. Let's figure this out. Maggie hesitated then, against all odds, walked toward the table. She pulled out the chair, her heart still pounding in her chest, but this time it was different. The tension between them had shifted. It was no longer just irritation and resentment. It was something new, something that neither of them had expected. She sat down, her hands trembling just slightly, but a smile tugged at her lips. She didn't know how this would go, what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, Maggie felt like she might be exactly where she needed to be. The conversation began awkwardly, like two people who had spent far too much time shouting at each other from opposite sides of a closed door. But within minutes, the strange tension that had defined their previous encounters started to dissolve. There they were, sitting across from each other in a restaurant that felt both too fancy and too intimate for a first meeting. A red polo and a red dress between them, both laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. Jack cleared his throat, his smile still lingering, but now it had softened, more genuine than before. So, this is surreal, huh? Maggie leaned back in her chair, her heart still racing, but not in the same panicked way. The shock of seeing him in the flesh, Jack Donovan, her upstairs nemesis, was starting to settle into something else. curiosity, maybe even amusement. She couldn't quite tell yet, but she was intrigued. There was no longer a right response to this encounter, just two people figuring out how to reconcile the online version of each other with the real-world versions that had collided so unexpectedly. Surreal is an understatement, Maggie said with a half-laugh. She took a sip of her wine, letting the smooth red settle the flutter in her chest. So, how long have you been pretending to be someone else? He raised an eyebrow, surprised by the directness. Excuse me. Grey Wolf 76. That's you, right? She leaned forward, her voice lowering as she spoke, amused by the thought. All that witty advice, venting about noisy neighbors and sharing bad puns. I should have known the guy who thinks Celine Dion is a necessary evil was you. He chuckled, rubbing his neck as if he were embarrassed. Guilty. I guess the anonymity of the forum made it easier to vent without feeling judged. He paused, his gaze flicking to the table before meeting her eyes again. But it wasn't all a lie. I wasn't pretending to be someone else. I just didn't want to show you the real me. Ah, the real you, Maggie repeated, her lips curling into a sly smile. The one who's got a treadmill addiction and a very loud opinion about my TD habits? Jack's grin widened, and for a moment, the gap between them seemed to narrow. That's the one, he said. And I didn't know you'd be such a tough cookie about it. Oh, I'm tough, she said, leaning in conspiratorially. I can be a force of nature when provoked. A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable but filled with the soft weight of realization. She had expected to hate him, expected to feel more resentment than she could handle, more frustration, more anger. But now, sitting across from him, seeing the way his eyes sparkled when he smiled, there was something human about him, something real. Jack leaned back, as if considering how much of himself to reveal. I never really meant to annoy you, you know. I work out at weird hours. I'm one of those people who thinks a treadmill at 6 a.m. is an achievement, not a disruption. But I guess I can see how it would have been, obnoxious. I didn't think about it like that. Maggie regarded him for a moment, eyes narrowing slightly. The defensiveness in his tone was still there, but beneath it, there was something softer, an honesty. So, you're saying you actually don't do it to drive me insane? She asked, teasing. Jack's lips twitched upward, and he leaned in a little closer. No, I don't. But I wouldn't mind if you didn't think I was a total jerk for doing it. She laughed, her laughter warm and easy this time, not the brittle, angry chuckle it had been in the hallway that morning. Well, I'm not going to lie and say I didn't want to strangle you a couple of times. But I've got a pretty high tolerance for noise, apparently. Good to know, Jack said, his voice light but full of something more. A kind of genuine relief, as if the weight of their earlier animosity had finally lifted. They continued talking, moving from topic to topic as the night unfolded. They swapped favorite recipes, discovering a shared love for spicy foods. They both loved cooking, but preferred experimenting with recipes rather than following instructions. Maggie found herself laughing more easily than she had in months. For the first time, she wasn't worried about the past, the awkward silences, the defensive walls, the ridiculousness of it all. After dessert, Jack stood up, sliding his chair back, and held out his hand. Walk with me? Maggie hesitated for a fraction of a second. She wasn't used to this, someone asking to walk with her after dinner just like that. But there was something about the way Jack stood there, his hand outstretched, that made her heart flutter in a way she didn't quite understand. He wasn't pressuring her, wasn't rushing her into anything. He was just asking for a moment of quiet, a shared walk through the warm savannah evening. She took his hand. They walked in silence, side by side, through the historic district. The air had cooled down, the sweet scent of magnolias mixing with the hum of distant streetlights. They strolled along the river, listening to the soft lapping of the water against the shore, the sound of their footsteps in sync. At one point, Jack draped his jacket over her shoulders. Maggie wasn't sure if it was a gesture of kindness or simply an excuse to get closer, but she didn't care. She was suddenly aware of how natural it felt to be with him. The walls between them had cracked, and something new had begun to grow in the space they'd shared. So, Jack said after a while, his voice soft in the evening air, "I'm not sure what happens next. I'm not really great at these kinds of moments." Maggie smiled, her breath visible in the cool night air. "Don't worry," she said, glancing up at him. "Neither am I." The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't filled with expectation or tension. It was just comfortable. They kept walking, their shadows stretching ahead of them, as if they were heading toward something neither of them could predict, but both felt the pull of. And for the first time, Maggie didn't mind. She was no longer worried about what would come next. For the first time in ages, she felt like she could just be with him. And that, she realized, was exactly what she needed. The next morning, the sun filtered through the blinds in Maggie's apartment, casting a warm golden glow on the familiar space she'd come to appreciate more than she realized. The sound of the coffee maker gurgling in the kitchen was a quiet comfort, a reminder of the everyday moments she had come to cherish. But today, everything felt different. The soft scent of fresh coffee in the air, the sound of birds chirping outside her window, it all seemed sweeter somehow. Maggie walked to the window and glanced out at the neighborhood she had known for years. She smiled to herself, then caught a glimpse of something in the reflection of the glass. Jack's face flashed in her mind, his laugh, the way he'd looked at her last night, so different from the annoyed neighbor she'd spent so many months despising. What was happening? The doorbell rang. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. It was too early for anyone else to be visiting. Tentatively, she walked to the door, her mind spinning with 1,000 possibilities. But when she opened it, she wasn't prepared for what she saw. Jack stood there, wearing a soft smile and holding a coffee cup in his hand. His eyes were warm, his usual cocky demeanor replaced with something more genuine, more real. "Good morning," he said softly, stepping closer as she stood there, momentarily stunned. "I thought I'd bring you something." She blinked, caught off guard by the tenderness in his voice. "Jack, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to thank you," he said, his voice steady. "For last night, for being you, for making it easier to forget the noise, the arguments, everything. You've got a way of making things seem less complicated, Maggie." Her breath caught in her throat. His words weren't what she expected, but they were exactly what she needed to hear. She stepped back to let him inside, feeling a little shy, a little uncertain. The tension between them had evaporated, but now there was something else, something deeper. As Jack entered, he set the coffee cup down on the kitchen counter and turned back to face her, his eyes searching hers. "I don't want to be that guy anymore," he said, his voice low but sincere. "The one who annoys you, the one who's always in your space. I realized last night that I've been hiding behind the noise, avoiding real conversations. You've got this way of breaking through all the BS, and I think I want more of that." Maggie stood still, letting his words settle into her chest. It wasn't an apology, Not exactly, but it was something more, an understanding. For the first time, she saw Jack for what he was, beyond the annoyances and petty complaints. She saw the real man beneath all the rough edges. "I've been avoiding a lot of things, too," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "I've been so focused on what was wrong with everything that I forgot to see what was right in front of me. Maybe we both needed this chance to start fresh." Jack smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't expected. He took a step toward her, then reached for her hand. "I don't want to rush anything, but I think we've got something here, something worth exploring." Maggie's heart raced as she met his gaze, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. She'd been through enough, she'd dealt with enough noise, and yet, standing here with him, this strange, unexpected man who had made her so angry, who had become a part of her life in ways she hadn't anticipated, she felt something shift, something good. "I agree," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Let's see where this goes." Jack stepped closer, his fingers gently brushing hers. He paused, searching her face for any signs of doubt. But there was none. They both knew, in that quiet moment, that the past had been left behind, and the future was waiting, one step at a time. Weeks passed, and with them, the tension that once defined their interactions faded into something comfortable, even beautiful. Maggie and Jack found themselves spending more time together, not just as neighbors, but as partners in a kind of unexpected dance. They went to the park together, tried out new restaurants, and even started sharing cooking nights, laughing at their disastrous attempts to make anything edible. Their early morning workouts and late-night movie marathons were now something they looked forward to, together, not in isolation. One evening, after another evening spent walking by the river, laughing at something silly, Jack stopped in front of her apartment door. He took her hands in his expression serious but tender. "Maggie, there's something I've been meaning to say," he began, his voice low. "I don't want to mess this up, but I've never been more sure of something in my life. I've never met anyone like you, and I don't want to let this, whatever this is, slip away. You're it for me. I know it." Her heart skipped. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply smiled and squeezed his hands. "Yes," she whispered, "I think you're it for me too." It was a simple wedding, small and intimate, with just a handful of friends and family. They married in Forsyth Park, beneath the grand oak trees draped with Spanish moss, surrounded by the peaceful serenity of the savannah evening. The air was warm, the sun setting on the horizon, casting a soft glow over everything. Maggie and Jack exchanged vows, simple, heartfelt words that meant more than either of them could express. They had both come from different places, had been brought together by circumstance, by noise, by frustration. And now they stood here, in this beautiful moment, finally understanding what it meant to truly listen, to truly connect. And when Jack kissed her, gently, tenderly, beneath the oak tree, it wasn't just the end of their past disagreements. It was the beginning of something far more wonderful, something that neither of them had ever expected. Together, they walked into their future, no longer as two strangers trying to avoid each other's noise, but as partners ready to face whatever came next.